Yeah, let's just check in. I mean, so I thought we could start with, I checked in with you a lot during the campaign, and you were canvassing like crazy. And yeah, one thing I was curious about, was it all in Tucson or?
I did Pima County, so yeah, Tucson, and then like the surrounding areas. You know,
So
there's
all in Pima County, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, since you worked really hard, and you know, in your words, you left it all on the field, which I think that's a great phrase. I've heard that about Kamala's campaign as well. I mean, I think really it felt like everybody was working really hard. I know a lot of people were phone banking. I wrote a lot of postcards. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I just wanted to see, you know, where you are right now. What's your kind of net feeling right now?
So I'm trying, first of all, like on Tuesday night, 5:37 was the last door that I knocked. No one was home, but I left them a thing that's for mine. So, you know,
Right down to the wire.
Right down to the wire, right? So and then I went and got a piece of pizza, you know, and a beer. And I thought, I really felt cautiously optimistic. Today, I'm in shock, and I'm kind of looking at trying to just understand, for instance, looking at statistics and what sort of why there was this red wave, and sort of what were the key messages that maybe Democrats got wrong and didn't talk about or didn't anticipate being such a problem. So that I kind of go through waves where I feel nauseous, and then I feel kind of hopeful, and like we're going to be fine. And
are you trying to are you finding yourself trying to sort of figure it out, like what happened? Or I mean, you sort of hinted at that.
Not as much as, like, I'm not like banging my head against the wall thinking like we did something wrong. Yeah. In other words, like it feels like actually, and many pundits, even on like the former Republican pundits, said that the campaign was absolutely A+ excellent. Mm-hmm. They managed all sorts of, you know, the bumpy road up to election day really well. And in general, you know, I guess what sort of haunts me is this like super, super low, this question, the direction the country is heading in, is it the right way? And it's like 71% of people say no. But that's like a very vague question, you know? You know what I mean? Is it?
Well, I mean, I think that speaks to that. I think, you know, I remember after 2016, I for a long time, and maybe even until now, maybe even currently, you know, I found myself really trying to figure it out. Like, what do people see in this guy? And, you know, because they were obviously seeing somebody in Trump that I don't see at all. And so, you know, it just was totally mystifying. And it was kind of shattering because, again, I felt like, you know, Hillary Clinton was going to win. I felt pretty optimistic. All the polls were saying she's going to win. I mean, and technically she kind of did win. She won by 3 million in the popular vote, and, you know, barely lost 3 states that decided the election. I mean, you could say she won. It's just because of a quirk of the Electoral College, she didn't win. But I remember feeling pretty shattered by it and trying to figure it out for a long time and just trying to explain it to myself. And I feel really different this time. I feel like it's super obvious what happened. I feel like, you know, the price of bacon went up, and a whole bunch of people said, we're going to let the other team try this. We're going to give the other team a shot because, you know, like, I don't like paying this much for bacon. And that's, so for me this time around is like this clarity. I mean, I think all those people that love Trump are still out there, but it's not a very big group. In fact, I think it's even smaller a little bit than it was the last time. I think that there were just enough of those other people who were like, you know, just the inflation thing, which hits incumbents everywhere. I mean, that's just an age-old story. When people are feeling like the economy isn't really working, they vote out the incumbent administration. And I think, unfortunately, here that coincided with, you know, this right-wing moment where all of these people like JD Vance and, you know, all of the billionaires that are kind of funding those folks, and all the Heritage Foundation right-wingers, all those people are kind of salivating at the opportunity to take over the government. But I don't think that the people who elected them were electing those people necessarily. I think it was just the typical, like, you know, but there's another thing that's different from 2016, and that is the way that Trump won, like the fact that the Republicans swept all the swing states, the battleground states, the fact that they won the popular vote, the fact that they took the Senate, and it looks like they'll probably take the House, like a full clean sweep. Like, it's totally, I mean, it's hitting hard, but there's a kind of clarity to it. It's sort of like, well, this is what people wanted. I mean, and again, I can explain it to myself really easily. Like it was inflation, and it just happens to coincide with this dangerous, in my mind, right-wing movement, and they get to take power now. And it's a coincidence that they get to take power as a result of people being unhappy about inflation. I mean, that's just a coincidence. So I don't know. That's kind of, I'm not finding myself agonizing to explain it to myself like I did in 2016. And I'm not feeling shattered by it. I think part of that is like, you know, we've already been through a Trump administration. Like, we've listened to this guy for 10 years now. You know, we've heard his voice on the radio, and he's dominated the news. And, you know, I already know how to handle that. So it's not this whole new thing that, like, I don't know how I'm going to handle this. I already know how to handle it. So, you know, it just feels like I'll do the same things I did before to kind of handle it. Now, there are different things. There's some different stuff, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
You know, that resonates with me. You know, exactly. I feel the same. In many ways, I guess there is part of me that's trying to, as a brand new unionist, like I joined my IATSE 336. I could say that out loud. People told me not to say it, but I'm going to say it. You want to hear it? Remember, he would just. But I joined my union in April.
Okay.
And it was the first time I joined a union, and I felt it was kind of symbolic. Like the work that I do for the AFL-CIO, they like all the people who are freelancing to be in a union. They try to hire union labor. So in some ways, like I just, you know, pay $50 a quarter or something, and I'm part of this group. But I also then got introduced to all of this political organizing that unions do. And that's, for me, I think the real conundrum is this feeling that working people who are right on the edge and struggling and really can't afford their apartment, you know,
yeah,
that those people, for whatever reason, it made sense to them to try this guy again, because he doesn't feel like something new and changed to me. Like, they just have this strange memory of before the pandemic, I felt rich. And I want that again. And maybe it's deeper. Like, maybe it's that the pandemic really spun us out. And there are things like we're aggrieved about, like, I hated wearing a mask and not having toilet paper and like being stuck inside. And I hated Zoom calls. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. There's this kind of latent kind of fuck that, you know, and I don't know why the incumbent gets it. And I thought Kamala Harris would have avoided the incumbent thing, that sort of trick, by not being Biden.
Not being, you know? Exactly, the incumbent. Yeah.
Yeah. And being, and maybe
she did on some level. Maybe she would have, maybe, I mean, I think Biden would have gotten beaten even, you know,
yeah, it would have been
more for sure. So I think in some ways she did avoid that, but not enough.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think the Democrats have a deeper problem, and, you know, we shouldn't spend too much time doing postmortem on this of a lot of people. It's going to be just dominating the news, and I just really don't care. But I think that, you know, you touched on this, which is that the Democrats sort of represent the status quo. You know, I mean, that's the message. It's like they sort of need to embrace all these people, from moderate Republicans all the way to the progressives. They're trying to kind of have this coalition that spreads across all that. But their message is really like, hey, don't let the status quo get destroyed by this guy, right? Like, and people aren't happy with the status quo. Right, so it's like the fourth or fifth election in a row where people are like, I'm really just voting against the other team. I'm not voting for something that feels good. Like, yeah. I'm just voting to not get any worse again. And so I think the status quo to a lot of people just feels very sort of disenfranchising and, tough to live in, economically, all kinds of ways. I think people are struggling in the status quo. And when your message is really like over and over again, hey, we're trying to defend the status quo against radical right-wing change that you definitely don't want. Like defending the status quo starts to become a weaker and weaker selling point, I think.
That just made me think of if we look at Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah.
Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Did he do Social Security? Was that?
I don't remember if he did Social Security, but like the Great Society, the War on Poverty, civil rights. I mean, it's amazing what happened during the Johnson administration. Yeah,
it really is. And my point there is to say that like elderly people adore Social Security.
Yeah.
And they love Medicare and Medicaid. I mean, my mom's going to have her shoulder replaced and it doesn't cost her anything. That's single payer. And she has to pay $500 a month for some kind of add-on thing. But people really like those. And you pull them across like they don't see that as a team thing. They're just like kind of like roads, like the common good. They see Medicare for old people as the common good. What I don't understand is why Democrats can't sell that success and ride LBJ's policies into getting working people to just solid vote blue every time. I just don't understand. Like, and people could point and say Bernie Sanders was trying and Hillary kicked him in the nuts. And that's why 89,000 people didn't vote for her in Michigan. It is baffling to me that I feel like when I have these talking points and I'm at the doors and I'm talking about pro-labor, half of the people I'm talking to just they're like, I don't know. I don't care about that. I just like Dragon Energy and close the border and deport people. I'm sick of seeing people speak Spanish at my Costco in Allentown. You know what I mean? Like what?
Yeah, it's very emotional for people. They don't it's not a rational thing where they're looking at a list of policies on each side. So it's, yeah.
And since the beginning of time, people have been trying to form groups and lead the groups using stories, telling them what's going to happen, what will happen if you elect me, especially, and I feel like what was strange was I thought that the Kamala Harris campaign's vision of move forward, like it choked me up. It got me, it made me feel really moved, but there was such a huge chunk of people that just were like, meh. Yeah. Like she's there. She's the first woman.
There's a huge chunk of people that were like, yeah, but bacon costs too much.
Yeah, which is absolutely absurd. Did they not know that our country's, had the quickest recovery? We had a soft landing.
They don't know that. Yeah.
Like if we were to, okay. Well,
or it doesn't, even if they know that, it's very abstract. They don't feel it or whatever. Yeah.
You've done hiring, like a hiring, panel where you're like sitting there on the panel and interviewing someone who wants the job, right? That's basically what the election is. You're saying, we're going to hire you to run the country, to be the executive, the chief executive. I feel like both Hillary and Kamala had the most impressive resume that I've ever seen.
Yeah. And people would still call Kamala a DEI hire and ridiculous talking points like that. She's the only person ever to have served in all branches of the government. And she was, anyway, we don't need to go through her resume, but that's absolutely just.
But so 2 points, like the person themselves and their resume. Donald Trump was a, talk show host or whatever, and then he ran the country and it was pretty, I don't think people gave him like a huge thumbs up at the end, which is odd.
Yeah.
And then now when you literally look at the numbers, like the stock market, you look at jobs numbers, you look at, like, it couldn't be better on paper.
Yeah.
But, the pandemic created a supply chain problem for housing. So that's why rents are high.
I mean, there are real economic issues. Housing is expensive. Wages are stagnant for, 4 decades now or some crazy thing, right? Like there are, and I think you and I would argue that Democrats have better answers for all those things than the Republicans. And I think that, that's what we're going to see in the next few years. Not that, I think it's going to be a rough few years. And I think a lot of the people that voted for the other team because they wanted, lower price bacon, I think a lot of those people are in for a sort of a shock with tariffs if those go through and things like that. It's not going to be what they voted for, but yeah, I mean, I guess so. That kind of leads to another thing you were talking about the other day, which is you were saying you kind of spin to like a pretty dark place sometimes, and so yeah, I mean, are you finding yourself doing that? Are you thinking about the future? Are you kind of obsessing in a dark way about the future, or what do you think about the future? Do you have like a mix of hope, and if you do, like, where is that coming from?
I mean, I guess that's a good question. I was joking when we were talking on the phone before, and I said 3 days of the condor. How like Robert Redford, and he's supposed to think of the worst case scenario and then prepare for it. And there is that part of me that is like, we were talking, what could we do to prepare like a network? Could we, I mean, I hate to say it, the dark part says, what we learned from the French resistance is that you can't see another resistor's face or know their name, because then when you're being tortured, you could give them up. So if we're going to meet in groups, we have to, we can't, you know what I mean? Like, that's like the darkest. And then there's a part of me that just goes, the guy is a kleptocrat, and I think he's too distractible and isn't necessarily going to do Hitler type level things, maybe some performative rounding people up and have like, maybe make it look like the show Cops and say, this is what I'm doing. I did what I said on day one, and some people are going to be deported, or he'll throw a bunch of criminals into Venezuela. So I don't know what he's going to do. But the part of me just thinks like, statistically, when you look at Republican administrations and, the jobs and the stock market, like, they fuck it up. And Democrats save them over and over and over again. That's just, Clinton had a surplus and Biden. And so there's part of me that's just like, I have to go through this period where we see high prices and the stock market crashes a bunch of times, and, that kind of thing. And I feel like a little like it's a Sisyphean task, that if Lena Khan was going to have another 4 years to go after what's causing the problem of high rents, the high price of bacon, collusion, and this massive amount of consolidation, that's going on. If she did, I think that people would start to feel in the next year or two like things were improving. If you kick her out now and let that go on like crazy, on the other side, it's just never going to go up. It's just going to be that price of everything is going to be, as you say, with tariffs, like trying stupid shit like that. So that was that was like back, a convoluted way of saying I bounce back and forth.
Yeah.
Between
me too. I definitely bounce back and forth. I think that the part of me, the things I'm dreading about the future, and when I think about what's probably coming, there are a couple things that come to mind. One is just that I think we're about to have installed a new political order that will persist for 30 years. When you talk about the Supreme Court, probably will have a 7-2 conservative majority, and the things that they'll be able to do. The Republican Senate will be able to just fast track a whole bunch of conservative federal judges around the country. And those things, those appointments last a long time. They are promising to massively overhaul and purge the federal government, right? So they might get rid of the Department of Education. They might get rid of the EPA. They might get rid of a lot of just things that we don't even know how much we depend on in terms of just inspecting our food and whatever, right? So, and and they are going to they have the power to remake the government into just an entirely new political order that is, so there's sort of a fear of the unknown and the sense that whatever they're going to do will last for a long time, and maybe until I die and our kids are well into adulthood. And that doesn't feel good. Like I'm dreading that, like what I imagine and how long it will persist. Even if they just manage to break shit and don't like install much, that broken system will last a long time. The other thing, I can't even remember what the other thing I was going to say. But I guess there's sort of I guess the things that give me hope though are, I feel like, autocratic regimes are fragile, to the extent that it will be sort of autocratic. Like you got to keep everybody happy as the leader, or they get rid of you pretty quick. And as you say, Trump is, he's just erratic. He's not very smart. He's not going to be able to do much. And I think the other thing too is there are a whole lot of us that are opposed to a lot of this stuff, and there will be fights. And even within the institutions that could enforce things like the military, there's a lot of diversity there, right? And so it's not like some countries where the military kind of falls in line with some leader and then just kind of then they have all that power and you can't remove them. I don't think we have a military like that. So I think there's a lot of opposition that will, make it hard for them to do things. I just remembered the other thing I said that that makes me a little bit fearful and gloomy about things is just the sort of boiling frog effect. I feel like, with something like mass deportations, like if there was a massive rollout of the National Guard being deputized to do that, or some big thing like the Muslim ban that happened last time around, like there were big protests, right? But if it's just like a person here and a person there, it's like it starts to be a thing that's hard to fight. And it starts to be a thing that just becomes normal life for people pretty quick for the rest of us. And you go, oh, that guy in suburban Chicago was deported. Oh, that's really sad. Oh, those 5 families in the Seattle area, that was really tragic. Right. And then it's sort of a boiling frog thing where it's sort of hard to fight. And it ends up being thousands of people in the end, but it's like here, there. And so it's hard to know how to stand up to that sort of when it's just sort of a frog boiling thing. And by the way, these other rights are being eroded over here, and that's painful also. And this little thing is happening over here, and that's also pretty painful. And so you start to sort of like, you just go into survival mode. Like, well, and that's a good way to cope, is just to kind of, everything's always okay in the present moment, right? That's a truth of sort of existence in a way, right? If you're not, anything bad that happened is a memory, anything bad that could happen is a worry, and it hasn't happened yet. So in that radical, like exact present moment, everything's okay. And that's, so I remember after 2016, kind of feeling pretty broken by the result, and kind of just going outside and looking at the sky and looking at trees and thinking like the sky is always there and trees are steadfast. And, these are things that are just like, help you feel that present moment, help you feel the scale of things. But yeah, so I don't know. There are things that make me feel gloomy. And then like I said, I think there's a lot of us that are ready to fight stuff that is bad. And, you and I talked about with the deportations, for example, like maybe we should start now trying to think about ways we could set up some sort of help network, or talk to ones that already exist, like this, SIREN, and there's other organizations that, that we could talk to that might have some guidance on, like, how we can preemptively start to fight some of that stuff. But anyway, yeah.
Or build the infrastructure to address it immediately. Like if you can apply for basically, like if you could provide a legal service or consult consult with someone to help them take advantage of appeals and assistant, whatever it is. I wanted to go back to what you said about the frog boiling in the water thing. And I wanted to say, expand from this national scope to, so when Putin invaded Ukraine, and it just seemed so unfair. It seemed like the Ukraine gave up their nukes in exchange for the US, UK, and Russian to protect them, right? So like one of those people is the bully and the violent, you know. And I felt like in some ways, I don't have a lot of experience with this, but I imagined imagine in your neighborhood if there's one family where there's domestic violence and everyone knows it, and you can hear someone screaming, and you feel helpless. Like there's nothing you can do. You can't call the cops. You can't, like, there's nothing you can do. And that's what it felt like to me. Yeah. Like watching Ukraine suffer while all of Europe and the US and these other, you know, liberal democracies are watching, and they just, because of nukes, and they just can't do it, right? And this NATO rule, you know. And then I feel like with Gaza, I feel like we're also in that boat where it's like, we're also just, our hearts are broken, and there's part of us that just feels like, and I would like to see, you know, I remember when Joe Biden said, don't, you know, learn the lesson that we learned in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like, don't go in there and destroy things, you know. This is not the way to do it, out of anger, you know.
Yeah.
And then you know, when his guys would say, hey, there's nothing we can do, we're just going to keep giving them the weapons and the money. And it felt like, yes, there's something you can do. You can say, stop, like do this, and this, or you're not getting another check, you know, like fuck it. So I feel like there is that sense of helplessness, and I don't like it. And I think a big thing I want to do is to not get comfortable as the water warms in the US. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think that's I don't know exactly how to do that, but I agree. I think that is a really good thing to be aware of, and to try to be, you know, super aware of this time. I think, I think a lot of the reasons why why I felt inspired by that, you know, the optimism and the freedom message of Kamala's campaign is, I think, you know, there are a lot of us who are, exhausted is the word I was going to use. I'm not sure. I'm looking for an even stronger word. Just like that cannot bear the casual cruelty that we keep seeing. And that there's this kind of, I mean, you talked about that guy that you ran into on the trail, the climber, right after the last election.
2016, yeah.
He wanted to get drunk on liberal tears or whatever. What did he say? Tell the story.
So it was after 2016, and I went down south about an hour and a half to this beautiful Cochise stronghold. It's like a climbing area, and there's gorgeous hikes. And this guy is
this was right after Clinton lost, right?
Right after Clinton lost, yeah. Like if it was Tuesday, I probably went down on Thursday or something. You know, it's like I was by myself and hiking, and I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And he said, "I'm having a great day. I mean, I'm drunk on liberal tears, you know." And then we were chatting about something. They were going to go climb inside, and I was just hiking up this trail, and it was very steep, and there's a lot of rocks and tree branches down and stuff. And I said, hey, if you come back out and if you find me, I was kind of kidding, but I was like, since I'm alone and my cell phone doesn't work, if I were to break my ankle, could you just check for me on this trail? Because as you come back out. And he goes, no way, man. I'm just going to step on your face and keep on moving.
Yeah. So
you know what I mean? And that was like a joke, but not really.
And there's a lot of that. I mean, I'm seeing it again. You know, I'm seeing women who are talking about, you know, Trumpers in their comments on social media, kind of saying, it's fun to watch all the women crying or whatever, right? Like there's this kind of casual cruelty that is, especially online. Mm-hmm. But I think there's so many of us that see that side of the right wing, and it's just so gross. And I think that's the feeling. So like I was really broken and really disappointed last time that in a really sort of shattered way when Clinton lost. But this time I sort of feel like disgust a little bit. Like that's the emotion that I find myself feeling. And it's with that casual cruelty and stuff, right? Like, yeah. And I don't want to give them my sadness and my fear and my, you know, even my anger. I just like, I don't want to give that to them. I just want to work and do, kind of just put one foot in front of the other and try to help things get better. And, being aware of that water warming, I think that's great. That's exactly right.
Yeah. I mean, my union connections they all say that writing policy, I mean, because a lot of them are lobbyists in Phoenix, right? So writing policy, like a big thing that's up right now is heat protections for workers that are outside. And it's a big fight. Like companies, third-party companies that work at the airport, they don't want any rules about how hot it gets and what, can someone have a break? Can they have water? These women that I met, that Julie Sue came to, the Secretary of Labor, came to Phoenix to listen. It was a panel, and these women who work, they clean the airplane. So the airplane lands, they turn everything off, and immediately the temperature rises to 110 because it's sitting on the tarmac in Phoenix, right?
Yeah, like inside the plane.
Inside the plane. Yeah. They won't let them bring water onto the plane while they're cleaning it. So these women they're actually finding passengers' water in the pocket in the back that's not empty, and they just drink those.
Oh my God.
I mean, And this one woman who was speaking to Julie, so she collapsed, and her supervisor said, "You probably shouldn't have partied so hard last night." And then she had to end up going to the hospital for heat stroke, and it took her like 2 days to recover. And anyway, so that's So sorry, that's sort of the horror story of what is happening today. And the unions are just pounding away at all of, like, county boards of supervisors.
Yeah.
We just passed one in Tucson, but it only affects workers who work for the county or vendors that we hire to work for the county. They have to treat their employees the same way, but everyone else is kind of off. You have to wait for OSHA or something, national heat protection policy. But anyway, my point is that, like, the unions are I've never seen anything so organized in terms of, like, from Wednesday morning, they're thinking about the midterms. And they call candidates and they say, "I want to hear your views on this thing, and we're going to either endorse you or we won't endorse you." And then they unfortunately have to somehow explain to their membership why they endorse that person and why they should vote for that person. And it's harder than I would have thought. But the fact that the machine is there and is running, and there's like a lot of very, very, smart, well-trained people who know exactly how to lobby, and they know who to go to, and they know, these endorsement panels are rough. Like, if you're a candidate, you have to sit down and they ask you all sorts of questions,
Yeah.
But so I guess, in that sense, I'm hopeful, because that, like, sort of getting right back to work.
Yeah.
Because the midterms are coming right up, and that's when, if anything isn't, that's when an administration who people were testing out, like, you want change, let's try this guy again, which,
right.
If he screws it up, I mean, the midterms, that's where he loses the House. That's where he loses the Senate, and then it sucks for him to be him, like.
Yeah.
So
no, I agree. I think that's the thing we need to really pay attention to and work for, is that those midterms, because I think they're going to do a lot of things in the first little bit of this administration that are broadly unpopular and painful to most people. They're going to be really, there's going to be a few people that are salivating at it, the billionaire class. I think they're sort of right-wing billionaires that are salivating around certain ideas. And there are, and things like busting the unions would be a part of that, right? Like the bosses would love to see unions go away, right? And so, but you come after the unions, and things could look pretty rough in the midterms.
Yeah, and especially Donald Trump said multiple times, I hated paying my workers overtime.
Yeah.
I always tried to get out of it. I always found a way not to do it.
Yeah.
I guarantee that this half of the union workers who voted for Donald Trump, the day that he gives permission for their boss to get rid of overtime, they will fucking freak out.
Oh yeah.
They will freak out because they love their overtime. They're like, if it's 41 hours, I'm getting time and a half, and then if it's 70 hours, I get whatever, like double time. And they love that they pay for their extra car that way, And I think that's the kind of stuff, as you say, like JD Vance warned, like it's going to get rough at the beginning.
Yeah.
People aren't going to be happy. You're going to have to endure some hardship.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing.
That's not going to go well. So I hear that same thing. And I remember thinking, that was my thought exactly. Well, that is the shot at the midterms right there. He's basically laying that invitation out there. Come at us at the midterms because you make things rough. Yeah. People don't want you there anymore. So you better solidify your power pretty quick in pretty cheaty ways if you expect to stay there after those midterms. But yeah.
And I don't think, for instance, border crossings have gone steadily down. So that's, if they can throw a bunch of troops at the border, that's not going to change. People will be afraid to come. Yeah. And they can shout, "Yay, we shut the border down."
Meanwhile, most people are coming through ports of entry anyway.
I know. It's so
like there's not that many people that cross illegally.
I know. That's why the whole wall thing statistically didn't make any sense. It's like if people overstay, like they come on a plane, and then they don't leave and they get a job.
Or they come through the Tijuana, border or whatever. Yeah. They don't. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think the thing that will probably, if he messes with the price of gas and then the price of produce by putting tariffs on things, we don't need to tariff our gas because we're now a net exporter, the largest net exporter of petroleum products in the world.
Yeah, that's another thing that anyway we could go on and on about the things that people imagine is true versus what is actually reality. But so I'm kind of I'm at the tail end of a cold. That's why I'm down here in the office. My wife is upstairs. She also has a cold. So my voice is a little rough. I'm a little stuffy. Probably shouldn't talk too much longer, but what else should we talk about? So we talked about the election quite a bit. Is there anything else? I had something funny I saw on the way home today. Yeah. It made me think, and it was like, it was a van. It was a van. It was Sam's Seafood or Sam's Shellfish. And it said, so it had this picture of a clam with like a cigar, like a tycoon kind of looking guy. And it said, dominating the shellfish industry. And I thought, man, that is like, not to bring it all the way back, but that's like the Trumpiest shellfish ad ever. That guy's like totally inspired by the billionaire guy. He wants to be the shellfish tycoon.
Right. That's
dominating funny. The shellfish industry.
Yeah, no, but to your point, like I feel like what's different between 2016 and today is like I this morning made a bunch of jokes with Huli when we woke up. Yeah. And I was singing a song.
Today,
yeah. Like I feel like when I'm not feeling nauseous and nervous about the future, I actually feel kind of lighthearted. Like I tried my hardest, I did my best, and this is what happened. And America voted, and they're going to see, we're going to find out. And so there's a little bit of that. I guess, is that acceptance in the grief?
I think it is, but I think there's a healthy version of that. I mean, I think there's a lot of like shitty, broken, corrupt regimes around the world, and people just live their lives and they do their thing. And the government does things to harm people, but by and by, a lot of, most people just kind of endure it and survive. And in fact, even I would say that, I think about, for example, in a lot of those regimes, art really thrives and comedy thrives in sort of underground ways sometimes, because that's the only way it can do it. But when you think about like the Soviet bloc countries, there was tons of literature and art and poetry and comedy that came out of those places. And just, I think there's something about political politically challenging environments that allow that where art thrives in those places for some reason, in rough conditions. I don't know, maybe especially. I mean, there's always this sort of old truths about artists who are happy in their lives don't produce any art. Like if you're in a happy marriage, you're you're not writing funny or beautiful romance stuff. It's when you're really pining after somebody who doesn't like you, right? Like that kind of thing.
Right.
So like there's something about misery, and I'm not wishing for misery, but there's something about being in places and environments that are tough that cause some people to really thrive and some kinds of culture to really thrive. So I think there's that too.
Sorry, go ahead.
We won't be the first country. It's come to us at last, possibly some of this kinds of political strife and corruption and things like that are so common around the world. Maybe it's come to us, and we're not, so like the fact that we're not the first, there's many people that live and even thrive, and so we do our best to help our kids thrive and to thrive ourselves and all that. Just kind of do our thing.
Yeah, two thoughts. One, what's his name? Solzhenitsyn was, So I often think of, and he would say that like at the height of the Soviet propaganda, like it did feel a little bit like 1984, where like all the messaging was controlled by the state, and even in your own head, and so he would oftentimes sort of rail against even that. So I agree with you. I know for myself, I've been curious, like I've gone through, as an artist, I was really prolific, went through a divorce, tried to pull myself up by my bootstraps, and went to a corporate gig, and it felt very biblically long. And I had this feeling like I wanted that there's a second act, like another phase, and it hasn't yet sparked. And it feels to me very hopeful that I'm curious to see like how my artistic impulse rises again, because it has felt very much kind of like, and I could pinpoint to it. I mean, I could pinpoint to that feeling of, when we're about to make an artistic, let's say a brushstroke, and the voice in the back of your head says like, "Ooh, that's just nah," or even like you're making a painting, and the voice says like, "Wow, that's not really worthy of the sort of price of the canvas it's on." Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I am absolutely familiar with that voice. Yes.
Right. So, and that's I know that's a common shared thing. What's that called? The negative voice, right?
Like the inner critic or whatever. Yeah.
And I had a teacher way back at NYU. She was actually like a filmmaker that did a lot of dance films, and she was in that part of New York that did a lot of modern dance. And it was like animation 101, and we were lying on the floor with big pieces of newsprint, and she'd give us a job like, take your ink brush and your inkwell, your Japanese brush, and for this piece, make marks on it so that 50% of it's white, 50% of it's black. Like just totally like sort of methodical, but do it sort of randomly. And then she would say, this one use circles, and she was talking to us. And in the background, she would say, you've taken on this path as an artist where you're going to hear your parents, your Aunt Judy, they'll say like, you maybe get a real job and don't waste so much time writing that play or trying to make that thing, right? And she goes, and you're going to hear your own voice say, no, it's not worth it. You're stupid. Go get a real job.
Yeah.
And she goes, I've learned that the voice will never go away, but if you make things, there's a chatter that builds that kind of drowns out that voice,
Yeah, I mean that makes me think of the artist's way. So I've been doing the morning pages again.
You have,
and I mean that's the whole thing, right? It's like you just produce stuff, and that voice starts to just get quieter and allow the creativity to flow, and the voice starts to realize, oh, you're not listening to me anymore, and then maybe it goes away, but I hear you. Like I started doing the morning pages recently again myself, because I sort of feel that same thing. Like I feel sort of a second act brewing. I'm not sure what shape it'll take, but like it's brewing somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of what this is, right?
Yeah,
You know,
I do. We're willing to sort of speak something into existence that didn't exist before. That's the magic of an artist, right? Is to take the unmanifest and move it into the manifest realm.
yeah, I like that.
And the one other thought, since I'm reminiscing in that way, but I wanted to do like a short film, and I wanted to gather my friends together and have them be in it, like whether they're and I had this thought that this woman, her name was Faith Hubley. I guess and she might have passed away, but she and her husband were famous animators, and they had done a bunch of work where they recorded their little daughters playing, and then they would animate it in these beautiful watercolors, and it just was like very poignant. And she came to do a crit at our class, and I had this woman, this mentor. She was a grad student who had made this, I thought, just a phenomenal film. And Faith, at the end of watching it, Faith just goes, well, my dear, life is not a montage. And the woman's film is a montage, like a series of like chunks,
Yeah.
And it was sort of like that, Marshall McLuhan's like the media is the message. You kind of get it, and then you're like, maybe actually I don't get it at all. Like, how can the fucking newspaper be what's written? Like, it doesn't really make sense. And life is not a montage. And then part of me wants to rebel against it and say, it's all it is a bunch of montages stuck together. That's what it is. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a montage. Like, it's one fucking huge continuous montage, right? So I wanted to sort of like rail against that statement, explore it, and then sort of make a film. And this style that I kind of am imagining, hopefully this is kind of makes sense. But remember Richard Linklater was, and he was really copying, who did MASH? Robert Altman.
Oh yeah.
So, and Robert Altman was the one that, we'd be following people who are having a dialogue, and then you'd peel off and go to this one, and peel off and go to that one. So it was this kind of continuous stream of people and moments that are like tied together through physical space. Mm-hmm. And then Linklater did a similar thing with what's the one, Slacker. Yeah. Like he just literally was just like a series of, the camera never stopped moving to a different group, and you'd have a little interaction, a dialogue, and it kind of, so I thought of, what if I took that kind of an approach, but I added in that, like, I'm fascinated with this idea of the behind the scenes of a TV show, or behind the scenes where like I used to say, imagine that I would go backstage, that we're all on like the stage of life, and the play of consciousness. And I would go backstage during moments of like my divorce or something, and it'd be like, I need to talk to my agent. This is not the film. I want it to be off this film. Like, I want to get off the film and call around and get me some auditions for a different story, because this one sucks. Like that feeling of, but you're like not on stage. You're like the actor who's backstage, and you're pissed. I wanted to try to find a way to make a series of layers like that, where you keep kind of breaking the fourth wall, and not exactly sure how far in you're going to go, tunnel in, So I don't know. It's just an idea, and it's when things are at that nascent phase, it's sometimes even dangerous to like speak them, because it sounds a little bit like not fully fleshed out. But
I think it's sort of brave to speak them. Like, I don't do that enough. I think it's good to sort of speak that work in progress, that sort of half-formed idea out into the world. I think that's a great thing to do. I wish I would. I need to do that more myself. I think that's part of the inner critic, is that those half-formed ideas get not shot down, but it's like, oh, you wait, hold on to this, let it develop like a pearl or something. Like put a few more layers onto it before you put it out there. So yeah, I know, I appreciate that you're I like the idea. It sounds cool.
Cool. Well, if you'll be in it, that would be great.
All right. Deal. Should we wrap this up?
Let's wrap this up. And then we'll continue to look for our name. Yeah. It's funny.
We'll have a name by the time we publish it.
Yeah, there you go.
We should say that we don't have a name right now, but
we don't even know. We're nameless.
Is there anything you want to leave with for today to end on? Or are we good?
I think just gratitude. Like, I'm grateful for you, grateful for our longtime friendship, grateful for the fact that we can have these conversations. And to me, they're invaluable and really wonderful. So,
yeah, I just, it's been one long conversation in our life, I think. And I love that we're still this close.
Yeah.
It's so great.
Yeah.
All right, my brother.
All right. Take care, man. And I hope you guys, the cold gets better fast.